All right, welcome back to Texas Sports Unfiltered, and joining us now is Ryan Fowler. He is a sports radio host for Tide 100.9 in Tuscaloosa, and a lot has been going on in Tuscaloosa over the last couple of weeks, to say the least. Ryan, what's going on, brother? Thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, you know this. You've been in radio for a long time, and you enjoy covering hard news like a Nick Saban retirement, but mentally it is draining. I know I went 17 hours of radio in 3 days from the time Nick Saban retired to we went extended show then, and then we went 7 hours when Kalen DeBoer was hired at the University of Alabama that Friday evening. I mean, we went on at 2 o'clock, and we did not go off the air until 9 o'clock when he actually got on the ground. So it's been a crazy couple of weeks, but it's you live and you feed off the emotions and the energy of the crowd, and the Alabama fans have been very energized over Kalen DeBoer, and I'm sure we'll get into it.
Yeah, it's a labor of love, as they say.
It
And
is.
you have been laboring a lot over the last couple of weeks. So we'll start with Nick Saban before we get into Kalen DeBoer. You cover the program better than anybody I know. You're as tied in as anybody when it comes to Alabama football. The news caught me, and I think most college football fans, by surprise when it came out on January 10th that Nick Saban was deciding to retire. Did you have any sort of inclination during the season that Nick Saban was maybe leaning this way, or was this as much of a shock to you as it was to me?
Well, I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of people that are going to tell you that they're going to tell you that they knew. Okay, I'm going to call baloney on that because I just don't believe it. Because at some point they're going to be correct, right? They're always going to be talking about retirement. I can't tell you the times that I've chased a Nick Saban retirement rumor out there. And to be honest, I was out in LA. We went out in LA and did the Radio Row thing, which it was singular. It wasn't plural. I was the only radio station out there for the entire week. And I had a lot of people that would walk up to me and be like, hey, is it really happening? And I look at 72, you don't ever know when, that time was going to come. I was live on the air when this came down. As a matter of fact, I was interviewing somebody from Texas, John McClain, which is the old Houston Chronicle veteran, just an absolute, just an incredible media personality that we always enjoy talking with. And I literally stopped him during the middle of the interview, and you could tell he knew something was going on. I said, John, hold on a minute. And I went to my Twitter account, and I was making sure that it wasn't like a fake Twitter account because Chris Lowe broke the story. And so then I log on to my personal desktop, and I'm going, okay, let me see. Okay. And I literally read off John McClain at the age of 72, according to Chris Lowe, Nick Saban will hang up the headsets. And he went, wow, you got a lot of things to talk about. You don't need me anymore. Ron, I'll just say this, that he's the greatest football coach to ever walk the sidelines. Call me when all this settles down. And I promise you, I text John a couple times, but we need to get John back on because he's just that, much of an asset to our show. But when you think about just that environment, and then automatically you almost shift as you're announcing that, and you just keep repeating it. You're just like, at the age of 72, Nick Saban retiring from college football. And then immediately you shift into what's next. You want to honor him, but then you also want to go back and make sure that you're understanding what is next for the University of Alabama. So it was a pretty stressful couple of days. And, each day as we explore about Kalen DeBoer, and I know you're probably going to ask me about, what I think about the hire. Greg Byrne, I think, went out and knocked a home run hire. I know Sark was a guy that I thought that they were going to look at and talk with. We heard a lot of different rumblings, but I also think that a lot of those coaches used it to get pay raises. Rightfully so. Their agent goes out and leaks their name, and all of a sudden they get paid more money. But I think Sark would have been a good fit here in Tuscaloosa. I think he would have known the Nick Saban system. But at the end of the day, Kalen DeBoer is the more I study him, and I know people in Texas, you ain't got to explain what UW was able to do this year. You guys already know that. But when you look at Kalen DeBoer, the more I study him, guys, I'm a huge fan of what he's been able to do so far. And, it's all about recruiting. And will he be able to recruit is the key to what Kalen DeBoer's success will be, because it was the catalyst for the Nick Saban system.
Definitely. Yeah, Nick Saban has been getting college football coaches paid for years, and it's funny, even in retirement, he continues to get college football coaches paid. Yeah, the coaching search, Ryan, I mean, it was 2 days in between the Saban retirement and the DeBoer hiring. And for me, on the outside world, it felt like 2 weeks. For you, it probably felt like 2 months, just the wild craziness of that coaching search. And I know people will say, DeBoer wasn't Alabama's first choice and he wasn't their second choice. And maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But just that whole search, those couple of days where it just kind of felt like the whole college football world was in limbo. What was that search like when everyone was kind of curious to see where Greg Byrne was going to go?
Well, and I talked with Greg about this after the press conference for just a couple of minutes. And he made a comment to me, and I'm trying to think if he said something in the press conference, but he said every day in a coaching search is really 7 days for athletic directors. And, whether it's, going through the hiring process, to go through and you're calling different people, you're making sure that, they understand, what you're trying to do, and you go through and you're doing all your homework. Every day, every 24-hour period is like 7 days. Well, I must tell you, that's the way it felt like from a media perspective, too, because that 3 days did not feel like 3 days. It felt like a month. I mean, you're just sitting there just going, so we're following planes and we're tracking planes. And, we know that he's not going to use the university plane, but I had a couple of tips on one of the planes that he was using. And I kind of followed it to UW on that Thursday or in Seattle. He was in Seattle. And I'm like, that must be his number one guy. And so when you see Kalen DeBoer, and the last thing you want to do is go out and visit with a coach, and then he turns you down, and then you have to go back to publicly he's not your number one guy, and you have to kind of fight that. I almost think when you look at Kalen DeBoer, he may have not been the number one guy, but he had to be one or two, because I mean, look how quick that went down. So when you start studying him, and we have a coaching consultant on our show, Dave Bartu. You should get him on if you know anything about Dave. Dave's a CFB matrix guy, CFB analytical. And what he does is he hands out coaching grades with what they do with the talent based on their team. So he goes through the roster and he evaluates what this team should be able to do based on the talent level. And he said there was no other coach in college football that did as much as Kalen DeBoer did with his talent level, that he was the highest graded coach in 2023. So that sounds pretty promising when you think about, Kalen DeBoer. He's got these Alabama fans really excited, but there's still some doubts of, is he going to be able to take connections to the West Coast and to be able to come in a southeastern geographical region and be able to convince those major players to come to the University of Alabama? Because if you can't recruit, that's where it really becomes a problem in the Southeastern Conference.
Absolutely. Yeah, Ryan, you said it earlier. Us Texas fans, we don't need to be told how good of a coach Kalen DeBoer is. We've seen it firsthand 2 years in a row. It's like, on one hand, it's great. We don't have to see Nick Saban. But on the other hand, it's like, this coach who has beaten us 2 postseasons in a row is someone we're going to have to go up against moving forward. I guess one more thought on the whole coaching search and situation before we get into some of the players who are leaving Alabama to come to Texas, and just kind of your thoughts on where Alabama is as a program right now. Do you believe, you brought up Steve Sarkisian's name a moment ago, there were Texas fans, myself included, kind of on the edges of our seats, wondering whether or not we were going to see another Chris Lowe tweet saying that Sark has accepted the job to be the next head football coach at Alabama. Do you think Sark got the call? Do you think he was a serious candidate for Alabama, at least at any point during the search?
I think they would be a fool not to at least see if there was mutual interest in Sark. It's kind of like Kirby. Chances are he said no thanks, but you would think that he would at least be engaged. Why would you not? I mean, it's kind of like Nick Saban when he was here. He probably fielded these phone calls all the time. Hey, do you have an interest? No. Do you have an interest? No. Do you have an interest? So I don't know what, if Sark gave them any feedback, but I think when you look at the connections back to Tuscaloosa, being with Nick Saban 2 different occasions, and what Nick Saban did for him. I mean, and Sark talks about that pretty openly, about Nick Saban helping him rebuild his career, and also the health issues that, Sark was able to find because what Nick Saban asked those assistant coaches to go through, right? I mean, he really helped Sark turn his career around, but also, the health issue that they found. And if it hadn't been for Nick Saban kind of forcing his assistant coaches to go through some of those health screenings, they may never found that. So, listen, I respect Sark. I think he was a solid, offensive coordinator here in Tuscaloosa. Enjoyed getting to know him while he was here. And, to be able to reel him away from Texas was going to be almost impossible, right? I mean, the money that you guys have got, the resources, and really, I think now in the NIL era, it almost gives programs like Texas the leg up. Fair? I mean, you guys have. I mean, look at the money. I mean, y'all raise millions of dollars in minutes, and it takes us weeks and months, if not that, longer to generate that type of revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the topic of conversation here, right? Like, is Texas right now the better job than Alabama because of NIL and the resources that Texas has? And, oh, by the way, you also don't have to replace the greatest college football coach of all time. So, it was a scary couple of days here, but ultimately, I think Texas fans are happy with the result. And I think Alabama fans are happy with who they got too. Ryan, your thoughts? I'll go selfish Texas questions here, and then we'll wrap up with just an overall thought on where Alabama is right now. But to this point, Texas has picked up 3 players from the 2023 Alabama roster in the transfer portal. It was Isaiah Bonds, it was Kendrick Blackshire, and then it was Amari Niblack in that order, all pledging their commitments to Texas. Would love to get a little bit of a breakdown on those guys and what Texas fans maybe can expect from some of the newest Longhorns coming over from T-Town.
Well, let me kind of break down the guys who really got an impact, okay? And I'll give you the example, and I'm sure you guys have probably talked about it. If you went to Daniel Moore Art, I'm not sure if you guys have like a sports artist that does these prints that you see hanging, different restaurants or different living rooms. Daniel Moore did a big portrait featuring Isaiah Bond, and you don't get a lot of those. It was Jalen Milroe catching the 31-yard reception to Isaiah Bond that beat Auburn. Right? It was the 4th down play, 4th and 31. They call it the grave digger. Matter of fact, Isaiah Bond kind of identified that. Isaiah Bond was a solid wide receiver here at Alabama. They really struggled in some areas to get that passing game cranked up. Now, was that on the offensive line? This offensive line was a complete disaster. They were 129 out of 133 teams in protecting the quarterback. I mean, let that sink in. 129 out of 133 teams. So they couldn't get anything really going offensively. Some of that was on the offensive line. Some of that was on quarterback. Some of that was on the receivers not being able to create some space. Isaiah Bond, like if you're asking me to give a grade or, maybe a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being Devontae Smith, Heisman winner, wide receiver, Julio Jones, Amari Cooper, I would probably put Isaiah Bond 6.5, 7 out of 10. I think he's got a lot of ceiling, but it's almost unfair when I throw out that type of grade. Let's say I give him a 7 because it's to be determined, right? I mean, look at Quinn Ewers. He's going to be able to connect with him as far as a wide receiver. He can do some special things. He's a special wide receiver, but it's almost unfair to look because this offense struggled to really gain any momentum. So I think Isaiah Bond is going to be another. I think everything I've said in the last 3 minutes, you could also apply that to Amari Niblack, right? It's one of those when you look at his talent level, it's off the charts. Yeah. Now he's a guy that when you spend a couple of minutes kind of analyzing, what he's been able to do, he's a freak. I mean, Amari Niblack is just literally he almost is a mismatch. If you could go out and put him isolated on linebacker, that's a win every day for Amari Niblack. I mean, he almost has that receiver type ability, and you saw flashes of it at times. But going back to no fault to his own, it was one of those that you just never could really get that passing attack cranked up. So I think Amari Niblack is going to be good. I have noticed, he likes to take it to social networks, and I know these players are kind of building, their brand and trying to really establish, who they are. Probably my advice would probably stay off social networks. I mean, I know when Texas beat Alabama here in Tuscaloosa, he took and went on Instagram Live, and he was taking jabs from Alabama fans, and he was saying all kind of crazy stuff. And I mean, it was, he kind of thought it was funny and laughing, and Alabama fans are like, "Are you kidding? Come on, come on." I mean, you're a current player, and the first thing you do after losing to Texas is you go on Instagram Live to kind of build up your followers. And it was both ways. It was the fans aggravating him, but he was aggravating the fans. And it was almost like he wasn't taking the loss serious, right? I mean, he was looking at it going, and so that would be my only advice is probably needs a little bit of growing up. As a skill set as a player, off the charts. But you can see that young player understanding his, and some of that may have been because he was frustrated, right? I mean, he could probably have done more. But I'm telling you, the ceiling, he could be a 10 out of 10. I mean, he could be a guy that you could really make an effective part of that offense. And I think he will. But I think my only advice would be stay off social networks. It's so easy. I mean, heck, I get caught in that trap sometimes.
Sure. We all do.
But to go to Kendrick Blackshire for just a couple of minutes, really, it's to be determined, right? He was a special teams guy here, highly recruited guy. I know he returns back to his home state of Texas. So I don't really know if it's fair for me to kind of say, hey, this is what he's going to be able to do. I don't know. I guess from my perspective is and I don't know if I can give you a fair opinion, because you got to keep in mind, we don't go to practice. They have us completely blocked out. I don't know if they do that over in Texas, but we're not able to go view practice. So I could probably give you a better explanation there. But he's done some things. You could see the potential, big physical linebacker that can play a couple of different roles on those linebackers. I think he'll be a solid player, but it's just I just don't know if I have a sample size where I can apply it and say this is what he'll be. But I do feel like I have a pretty good sample size with Bond and Amari Niblack.
Definitely. Ryan, last thing before we let you go, and can't thank you enough for the time today. Kind of a twofold question, right? I think I know your half of the answer, but I'll ask it again anyways. What's your confidence level in Alabama, maybe not being as dominant as they were with Nick Saban, but just Alabama not taking some sort of major step back without Saban there? And then also on your show, I mean, you take calls, you take texts. I see you on Twitter all the time. You're interacting with Crimson Tide fans 24/7, 365. What's sort of the fan base's thoughts on where this program is going now that the GOAT is no longer a part of it?
Yeah, and really I'm going to tie this to Texas just for a couple of minutes. This is going to do a lot. I go back to Julio Jones in 2008. Julio Jones committed to the University of Alabama and Nick Saban. It was kind of the official stamp of approval for Nick Saban. Hey, I believe in what this guy is going to be able to do. Keep an eye on Ryan Williams. Sarah Land, he was a number one prospect for 2025 recruiting cycle. He was a junior. He has reclassified and now will become a part of the 2023-2024 cycle. So he'll be eligible to play next year. Ryan Williams, when we were going on the air, has canceled his official visit to Texas. Many people thought it was an Alabama-Texas battle. They thought that Ryan Williams, Texas, Alabama, when you think about it right there, that was what was going to be the conversation. That was going to be, okay, let's go back and answer this question. Kalen DeBoer could land Ryan Williams. That might be that Julio Jones from 2008, that stamp of approval. That is something that is to keep an eye on, to be able to say, if he's able to do that, because I think that's if there is any angst in the Alabama fans, it's about recruiting. That would probably solidify, calm down a little bit and go, hey, if he could do that, if you could build a relationship offensively, I think Kalen DeBoer is going to be dynamic. He's probably built. This is probably one's going to be the stinger. He's probably built a better coaching staff than Nick Saban had the last couple of years, top to bottom, 1 through 11, 10 assistant coaches, and the head coach. We were very top heavy with Nick Saban, right? Number one, but then you went downhill pretty fast when you go into those assistant coaches. I think when you look at Kalen DeBoer with these coaching staff that he's been able to build together, we had a guy that came on today, which was Dave Bartu, said he has the best coaching staff top to bottom in college football. I mean, he talked to head coaches from leaving their jobs and coming in to coach. One is a defensive coordinator, Kane Walmack, but then also Maurice Linguist to coming in as a position coach. The lead coaches at Buffalo and University of South Alabama, it's pretty crazy, and that grabs your attention. So the coaching staff, yeah, they're going to have to build the roster back up, but it's not as depleted as a lot of people think. I mean, they've still got a lot of young superstars on this team. I don't think Alabama's going anywhere.
Ryan, you are the man. Always enjoy catching up. Thank you so much for the time, and look forward to the next time we get to catch up.
Hey, something tells me we're going to do this probably more frequently with Texas coming into the SEC. Appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much.
Looking forward to it, Ryan. Take care, my friend.
You are welcome. Thank you.